scattered and under pressure. The first churches hear the very first written word of what we will call the New Testament. James shows what mature faith looks like on the ground: steady joy in trials, wisdom in speech, and obedience that does the word. This is Seek, Go, Create. You're listening to Read the New Testament in 90 Days, 27 books, in order, in context. Thanks for joining us here. If you're going on this journey with us, this is step one along the way, the book of James, the first book that was written in the New Testament. We're walking through the New Testament the way it was written so you can hear it the way the first churches did. Before we get too far, I want to make sure that you go to our hub link that's got all the resources, all the info for this read through the New Testament in 90 days. And it also has a download link so that you can actually print out a download version of the plan. Go to K2M.Foundation/NT90. That's K2M, the number 2, K2M.Foundation/NT90. That hub page will give you a tremendous amount of background info, and then that downloadable link that'll get you something that you could print out, put in your Bible, put on your fridge, put where you want to have it so that you could go through this reading plan with us. Today's stop is James, the first written book of the New Testament. Let's hit some of the key facts of James just so we could kind of get in the mode of being in that time and in that place. The author, James, the Lord's brother, and he's the leader of the Jerusalem church. The date, we believe it was written around AD 48, around 18 years after the cross and the resurrection. And from what many scholars believe, this would have been the first New Testament letter written. It's why we're starting with James. We're going in order. And I just want you to think about something real quick here. This is the brother of Jesus Christ. He was not a believer and a follower at the time that Jesus walked the earth as we understand it, but after the resurrection, it sealed his belief and he understood who his earthly brother really was. And so he's now had 18 years to process that, to lead the early church in Jerusalem, and now he's sending this letter to the audience that is the scattered Jewish believers. You'll see it right when you read the first verses, the 12 tribes in the dispersion, that they've been dispersed throughout the empire, the Roman Empire. The setting, persecution is rising. The temple in Jerusalem is still standing. And once again, it's 18 years since the resurrection. So here's some historical context, some things that were going on around the places that the audience would have received this letter. Rome, the empire, is at full strength. Claudius is on the throne, and the Jews are tolerated, but they are watched. So the Roman Empire and the kingdom that the Jews had, those are still in existence. This audience of believers is a small group that has been dispersed throughout, and we are receiving this letter at that time. In Jerusalem, the temple system is fully operational. Sacrifices, feast, the priesthood is still intact. Now, I want to make sure we're clear on this. The resurrection was the thing that changed everything for these believers. They are still holding to what many witnessed and what they've been told is the most incredible event of all time, I believe, and definitely during those times. It's that resurrection. They're scattered, but they believe that there was a resurrection that occurred, and that is the kingdom that they are a part of. The believers scattered after Stephen's martyrdom. They were growing in Antioch, Damascus, and beyond. Here's the tension that was going on in the room as you receive this letter and as you're thinking about the context of the audience. Jewish believers, people that had come out of the Jewish faith, had left that to believe in the Messiah, the resurrected Messiah, and they were caught between the synagogue rejection They were being pushed on very hard by those in the Jewish faith and the Roman suspicion. They didn't quite understand the difference between this new group called Christians and the faith of the Jews. In fact, in Rome, they still sort of lumped it all together. And so, huddled in this room where we're about to receive this letter, that is who we are. We are listening with those two forces outside of this room that are pressing on us in both directions. We're holding on to that kingdom that doesn't really get along well with either one of those. Why now? Why are we receiving this letter now? 18 years, eyewitnesses were enough. Peter preached in Jerusalem. The 12 were scattered but reachable, but by AD 48, things had changed. Stephen had been stoned, like we said earlier. Believers had scattered to Antioch, Damascus, and beyond, and the movement was spreading faster than the apostles could travel. Communities were forming, small groups were forming, where no eyewitness could visit. They needed written instruction. They needed letters. James felt that, so he wrote what we now call the first New Testament, the oldest New Testament letter. It wasn't theology, but practical wisdom for people under fire. Other letters and accounts were probably being written during that time. Mark may have begun capturing Peter's testimony. We'll talk about Mark in our next book, but that would have been maybe in the early 40s, AD 42 to 45. Luke tells us that many had undertaken to compile the accounts. He says that in Luke 1:1, but some were lost, some weren't preserved. Whatever it is, what we have are these 27 books that starts with James, the first of them that we're reading now. And here's what you're going to encounter in the book of James, just some things to think about here. James is practical, direct, and unflinching. Nice, short, to the point letter. It's wisdom for people under fire. You'll hear about trials and joy, how suffering produces endurance, and endurance makes you complete. And think about this audience when you read about suffering. I do believe we need to apply it to ourselves today, but think about them so that we could truly understand it. He also talks about the tongue, the small member that sets the whole course of life on fire, wealth and poverty, the rich fading like flowers, the poor being lifted up. James talks about faith and works. Not opposed, but inseparable. Faith without deeds or works is dead. And then he also addresses prayer and healing, the power of the community interceding for one another. He doesn't mince words. He's writing to people who need to hear the truth plainly. And so this is what you're going to be doing. You're going to read James. We've got it in the reading plan to read it over the next 3 days. If you can, read it in one sitting. It's a nice short book. Try to read it in one sitting, and maybe over the next few days, read it a few times with this context in mind. Now, before we finish up here, I want to remind you the next episode is going to be Mark. We are going to be getting into a gospel. It's the first gospel that we believe was written. It's fast, it's urgent, it's written for believers who need to remember who Jesus was before everything changed. And a quick reminder here before I finish up with an immersion for us to really get in the mood to read the book of James. Make sure you're following along at K2M.Foundation/NT90, K2M Foundation/NT90, and make sure you get the printable and shareable download reading plan there. And you know what, before we kind of really get rolling on this, make sure you kind of share this. We want some people to go along on this journey with us of reading the New Testament in 90 days in context, in order. So make sure you share it with someone. Okay, before you read James, let me set the scene for you. Listen to this. It's AD 48, 18 years since Jesus walked out of the tomb. Scattered Jewish believers crowd into a meeting room in Antioch. A courier arrives with a scroll, the first written word of the New Testament. James, the Lord's brother, the leader of the Jerusalem church, has written. Picture that crowded room hearing this letter read aloud for the first time. Feel the pressure of exile workdays and synagogue rejection. These words weren't written for a bookshelf. They were written for survival. Now, Let's read.